GM, everybody. Welcome to another interview, to another live stream. Learning about tech, learning about blockchain, learning about everything in this wonderful landscape that we participate in. Today is going to be a little bit different. I don't normally do this where I bring on somebody from the Cyfrin team, but we're bringing on somebody from the Cyfrin team today because there's a lot of things I wanted to talk about, a lot of questions I wanted to ask him, and I said, hey, you know what, let me just ask you on stream. That'll be fun for the two of us. And especially around, hey, how do we architect things in 2025 with AI, with, Web 2, Web 3 technologies becoming so much more prevalent? How do we think about that? What are the challenges associated with it? For anybody who has taken the full stack curriculum on Cyfrin Updraft, this is definitely for you. For people who are looking to build products in this industry, this is for you. And we have, the mastermind behind many of the Cyfrin products out there today, including Updraft, CodeHawks, our sites, our head of engineering here at Cyfrin. We have Mike. Welcome to the stream. Mike, how are you?
I'm good. Yeah, great to be here. It's going to be good getting roasted by my boss live on stream. Very, very excited for this opportunity. But I'm excited to talk about all the decisions we made, the right decisions, the wrong decisions. I'm not going to shy away from saying that some stuff was wrong. I'm really happy with the platform that we have. So yeah,
I'll behave.
Ask away.
I'll behave. That's actually, yeah. So, and for everybody kind of tuning in, Mike and I work on the same team. We work on Cyfrin, and we, all the cool things that everyone hopefully uses and engages with. So, before we jump into kind of the topic here, Mike, if you want to give like a little introduction, what's your background, how you got into Web3, how you got involved with Cyfrin, how'd you get here?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'll try to give a TLDR. I've been in the industry for about 11 years. In the industry, what I'm talking about is like development, web development. Started mostly front end, transitioned pretty quickly to back end. Worked on some larger projects, so like companies like Walmart, Nike. Worked with them quite a bit early on in my career. And then I realized I really like startup-y stuff and less corporate infrastructure stuff. So I moved on to startups. And worked with helping people get products to the end goal, right? Like my whole mentality isn't really like, hey, I'm a front-end engineer, I'm a back-end engineer. I'm more of like a solutions architect where I come in, see what needs to be done to get the product over the finish line, whether that be back-end, front-end, I'll do it, or I'll hire people to do it, or I'll manage the people that are already doing it and try to get a product to a finish line as best as possible, as quickly as possible with the resources that are available. With the Web3 stuff, I was in between contracts at the time, and Ethereum, Solana was blowing up. I was looking for the next thing to look at. I like niche development stuff. So I was on like the Chrome app game, probably the year that it came out with Chrome extensions and Chrome apps. And that led to like multiple big contracts for me. So I was like, as soon as I was done with that, I was like, what's the next big thing? Like, what's next that I could niche down into? And it seemed that Web3 was the thing. Now, I don't know if this was a mistake or positive. I did go down the Solana route initially before they even had docs. So I banged my head against the brick wall like 15 times, eventually learning how that worked and how the Solana ecosystem interface with web development, it was fun to figure it out without like really good documentation. It was a different challenge, and that led me to a couple contracts in that space, led me to a couple connections that eventually led me to you, Patrick, where we had a chat. You were just starting Cyfrin, I think, at the time, and we connected, and I think we had good like synergy of like what we wanted to get done and how quickly we wanted to get done, because that's kind of what I'm known for is, hey, what's your goal? This is all the steps you need for that goal. Let's get that goal done as quickly as possible.
Oh yeah, thanks for the intro there. Yeah, the fact that you got into kind of Solana first has made it so that a lot of the Cyfrin devs are Solana pilled, which is interesting because we do so much EVM content, and yet like the team working on the back end is just very, very Solana pilled, because like a lot of our team knew you through the Solana ecosystem, and that's just kind of funny how that works out. So yeah, all right, Mike. So let's jump into stuff. So full stack architecture, building ecosystems, especially in the Web3 space. So one of the main questions I want to talk about was testing and setting up like a strong testing environment. So and to give everyone listening some context, so we launched the full stack curriculum on Cyfrin Updraft at the beginning of the year. The full stack curriculum teaches people how to build Web3 apps, right, in the ecosystem. Hey, how do you run an indexer? How do you connect to a wallet? How do you send transactions? How do you read from the blockchain? All that stuff. And Mike and I had a number of conversations. Hey, how do we want to teach people? What technology do we want to use? And I'm going to steal a little bit of Mike's thunder here. But Cyfrin, we are a Svelte shop. So pretty much all of our apps, or what like 90%? I feel like there's a couple, there's a couple random, Next.js here, Next.js projects here or there. But mostly what we do is Svelte. And originally we were like, hey, let's do Svelte. But as we got into that, we were like, so few people know Svelte. AI is really good at React. Maybe we just do React. And actually, before we get into testing, let me ask you this. So why did we eventually go back from Svelte, which arguably, would be beneficial for us to teach people Svelte, because then it would be easier for us to onboard people. Why did we decide to go with Next.js instead of Svelte?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I think you hit a couple nails there, but I'll expand on that as well. So essentially, this was our first foray, or not our first foray, our first latest foray into full stack curriculum. And what I was looking at the time was like, what's out there that people understand already that can then link to the Web3 side of things easily. And Svelte is there for sure. There is some like patterns that you can follow, Svelte wallet adapters, but Next.js is the dominant player in the space. And when you go to AI, and a lot of our students, as we know, go to AI to get help, a lot of the responses, especially at that time, were giving responses directly in Next.js. And even right now, if you don't specify a web development framework to use, the default coming back to you is always going to be Next.js. So that hurdle to me was a little bit too much for the first full stack development course that we're going to be releasing on Updraft, right? I wanted people to have a really, really good on-ramp into web development. And when we had that discussion, I was like, I like Svelte. And we can go into the reasons why we chose Svelte for the platforms as well later if you want. But like, I really like Svelte. I think it has a lot of good positives, but the problem is the education around it. And I wanted to be the first course that we put out to be the best on-ramp into Web3 full stack, which is right now Next.js. Now, having said that, since we've had that discussion, a lot of stuff has changed in the sense of all of these newer models, GPT-5, Claude 4.1, Sonnet, they all have a lot more context on Svelte now than they did back then. And so they're giving slightly, actually significantly better responses to the Svelte stuff. So it might have changed our opinion on it right now. But again, I still would have probably leaned towards Next.js just due to the mountain of resources available out there and to get people into it as quickly as possible.
Okay. So for Cyfrin then, if, you've been on the team for 2 years now?
2 years and a bit, yeah.
Hell yeah. Thanks, Mike. If you were to go back, or if today I was like, yo, Mike, we're going to build this thing called Cyfrin. We're going to build Updraft. We're going to build Solidit. We're going to build Codehawks. We're going to build, all these products. Would you still choose Svelte?
Yes.
Why?
I would still choose Svelte. So
are you knowing that it's actually going to be harder for us to get talent because of what you just said, right? There's this mountain of Next.js information out there. Yes, you're saying AIs are getting better at Svelte, but especially in the the Web3 ecosystem, which we haven't really touched on, especially in the Web3 ecosystem where like VM and WAGMI, they have like Next.js support out the box, whereas like Svelte support, you basically have to do vanilla JavaScript and then kind of port it over to. Sorry, I'm kind of like teetering off in too many directions here. But yeah, you would still choose Svelte.
I would still choose Svelte. And I would actually choose it based on what you just said. So the fact that you have to use vanilla JavaScript is one of the reasons that I really like Svelte. And vanilla JavaScript, with that, I really mean TypeScript. Everything that we build in Cyfrin is TypeScript related. Like, we don't have any JS files. But regardless, the fact that you can use straight JS, straight TypeScript to adapt anything to Svelte is one of the main reasons that I like Svelte. As I was going through my career, I realized that the base foundations of each language are the things that draw me to that language usually. And the abstraction layers that are built on top of them, the more abstraction, the more I get put off, I guess. And when I was going through my kind of, from vanilla JavaScript to whatever framework next, I tried React. I really didn't like React at the time. Now, having said that, this was like 7 years ago. When React was class-based and stuff like that. It wasn't the greatest experience. But then I tried Vue, and I kind of resonated with Vue a little bit more. It was a little bit more like JavaScript, a little bit more like TypeScript, back again to that language barrier. And then when I started going into Svelte, it was almost exactly like TypeScript and JavaScript, right? And I really liked that it was foundationally just that. And I could build anything in TypeScript and JavaScript without having to worry really about an adapter layer on top. So the adapter layer that you're building for something like WagMe is really just a couple API points. Like, it's just an API that'll point to whatever UI that you need to build, rather than having to wrap it inside of the React compiler or interface with the React APIs. You're just interfacing with more or less JavaScript APIs. So that's one of the main reasons I like it. And on the other side of it, you mentioned like it would make it harder to hire people. I don't see it that way, because on-ramping onto Svelte when you're already established in a framework is really, really easy. And the reason I actually like hiring Next.js devs onto our Svelte projects, and I always, when I post a job spec, I'll say like Next.js is perfectly acceptable, and same with Nuxt and any other framework, because I can see them starting to understand like the framework side of things. And then when they get into Svelte, they're usually like, oh, this abstraction layer is easier to understand. This abstraction layer is easier to understand related to the React one. And so they almost like on-ramp, and then their satisfaction goes up a lot of times. And therefore their knowledge goes up. And it's really like, at the end of the day, when you learn one framework, that's all you really need to know to understand all the other frameworks. They're so similar nowadays that it doesn't matter too much from a syntax perspective anymore. And so the limitations of like on-ramping people isn't really a big thing. The limitation for like finding the right resources is the thing that scares me for like recommending Svelte right off the top, because there's just so many more React Next.js resources that when someone's just searching, and when someone has already ramped up a little bit and they're looking for the next step, and like Updraft could be their next step into web development, they might get put off that they see Svelte there and not take it because they see Svelte there because they've already been on-ramped into Next.js. So that's what I wanted to avoid again. And the next step of that is hopefully at some point we will have a Svelte course on Updraft where people can do the exact same on-ramp I just talked about, where we hire people and they can be like, oh, this makes sense. And when you switch from framework to framework, you also solidify the foundational concepts of what a framework does a lot better. Whereas if you stick with one framework, it's hard to separate where the TypeScript is and where the JavaScript or where the React is. And you start to get lost in that like barrier, and it becomes harder to troubleshoot a lot of times. So I highly recommend people try different frameworks as they're going through. It doesn't have to be Svelte. There's like a million other ones out there, because it'll solidify the concepts in whatever framework you need to use more.
I took some notes on a couple of your points you were making there. There's a couple of different directions we want to go down. And I want to go down this direction just real quick, and then I do want to get to like architecture and testing. So you said, hey, at some point, we want to have a Svelte course on Updraft. But so with AI, becoming so prevalent, a part of me, wants to ask, like, how important is it even for somebody to have experience in a framework? Because I'm also thinking from my end, okay, like, I have limited time at the end of the day, right? Like, and if I'm going to make a course, if I'm going to release a course, I want it to have maximal impact. So we have Solidity and we have Viper on Updraft right now. And a lot of, what I did was I rewrote a lot of the Solidity and Viper to, make my work a little bit easier. Yeah, I used AI to help me, but I still had to like go back through and like, make sure stuff was correct. And there were times when I was doing that when I was like, is this even a good use of my time? If you learn the Solidity, you're like 95% of the way there. Yeah, there's some nuanced differences, but you kind of have to get to like assembly to even really understand what's going on under the hood. What are the differences there? So like on you saying, hey, I would love for us to have a Svelte course at some point. In the age of AI, is that going to be a big deal? Is that going to matter? Is that Mike, is that a good use of my time? Is it like, do you want me to do that?
No, it's a really good question. I think it all depends on where AI goes, right? Like this is where I kind of always come back to with the AI discussion. I don't want to extrapolate out more than a couple of years or even less than that, because I'm afraid that that could lead to us being like, oh, let's not do anything. Because, you know, if the trajectory stays the same, or it's even if it slows down even a little bit, as long as it doesn't plummet off the hill, like we know where it's going. We know it's going to change the landscape of development in all languages. Doesn't matter, web development, like smart contracts, everything. And so if we start to plan for that from a perspective of content right now, it's almost impossible. And I feel like it'll make us freeze. It'll make us not do anything. So the reason that I think, again, a Svelte course is still relevant even in the age of AI right now is, again, I do believe that the people that are going to be able to understand the foundational elements of a language, of a project, of a framework, are still going to have the ability to be participating in the economy, like the web development or the programming development economy in terms of getting a job, because they will be the ones that control the AIs. Like there's still going to be a man in the middle somewhere that's going to be, you know, monitoring everything. And the more foundational knowledge you have, the easier it's going to be for you to review code. And that's the other thing, is like when you're teaching AI, I feel like part of that teaching is also going to be really understanding deep concepts so that you can review code, because you know how hard it is to review code. I mean, our auditors in Cyfrin, they review code every day. That's one of the hardest jobs out there, right? Like it's like writing code is one thing. Reviewing code, I feel like that's the next level of it as a developer. Like when you're going through your career, you realize that as you get more senior, you're writing less code and reviewing more code and making, you know, architectural decisions. So it's a long-winded way to say that learning, again, a more foundational framework like Svelte will teach you more foundational concepts in JavaScript, and will teach you a better foundational understanding of frameworks in general, of how they work in general. And I think that that will provide a good on-ramp, again, for you to be a higher level developer.
I guess the question more that I'm trying to get at, right, is if I teach a Next.js course or a Svelte course, it almost still sounds like it kind of won't matter in the future, because either one's going to give the foundational one. So kind of like the Viper to Solidity, like in the future, you kind of just learn, like, I don't know, maybe I feel like maybe you did answer this and I kind of missed it. But like, I feel like if you learn Solidity, you basically learn Viper. If you learn Next.js, you basically learn Svelte. Or you saying, no, it's not the case. Like is an additional, if I go back and I do take our Next.js course and I redo it in Svelte, is that going to achieve like what you're talking about here? Like, will it be a good use of time for somebody who went through the Next.js course to also go through this Svelte course? Or
I wouldn't want it to be a one-to-one reproduction for sure. I would want it to cover other topics of some sorts. And yeah, we can discuss that. But the idea that I have is that, like, yes, if you understand Solidity, you know, you do understand other languages, but like Solidity and Python are significantly different languages.
but Solidity and Viper are pretty similar.
Yeah, fair enough. Okay, Solidity and Viper are pretty similar, so maybe that's a good comparison, I guess, to React and Svelte. I don't know the differences between those two. I do know that there are some pretty significant differences between React and Svelte. And again, my point is that knowing one, and just like, especially if you learned, let's say that you jumped into programming, you didn't learn the foundational like elements of programming, you just jumped into Solidity. I think a lot of people can say that was their path, maybe. Right? Like they skipped the core fundamentals. They just jumped into Solidity. I know that's a lot of path of people that learned React, is that they've literally jumped into web development, and then instead of learning JavaScript and TypeScript first, they went straight into React. Right? So learning that, it's good, and you'll get a lot of knowledge from that, but you're going to start missing some core concepts of how JavaScript and TypeScript work if you do that. And I think it's the same if you do the same thing with Solidity. And again, you can correct me if I'm wrong. If you didn't understand the core concepts of programming languages, you're going to jump in and you're not going to know where Solidity begins and, you know, core, I don't know, what is it built on? Is it, what's the actual language underneath?
It's C.
C, yeah, okay. So, I mean, yeah, you're that's quite a far abstraction from C, but okay, so you're not going to know where, you know, Solidity begins and C ends or something, or C ends and Solidity begins.
Right.
And knowing that, I feel like you can be a way more effective developer in a smart contract. Like if you know C first and you jump into Solidity, I feel like you'll be a better developer.
Yeah. Okay. So, but I guess
it doesn't answer your question directly.
Yeah. I was just saying.
I get that. And I think, again, I do think that it has some nuance there. And I still think that there's some value to make another Svelte course, not a one-to-one copy of the Next.js course. It would probably be a short one, a shorter one, just to get people to understand that there's multiple options out there. And again, having them switch between them is a good thing for them at the end.
Yeah. And then maybe there's this is maybe a much longer conversation just on like, all right, well, what's the future of education going to look like with AI? But, you know, whole other conversation. Yeah. And then Kira wants a C course. Kira, we need to do more ZK first. You know, there's no time for C. But okay, I want to pivot a little bit because I do want to get to like architecture and testing. So let's say, okay, I've decided I'm going to go with Next.js. I'm going to build a Web3 dApp. Amazing. Let's go forward. With Cyfrin, we have kind of this, what I think is like becoming kind of the enterprise standard of apps. So on Updraft, everything's pretty simple, where you have your front end and your back end is exclusively, you know, blockchain. We had a little
not blockchain. Opposite.
What's
not
up?
Blockchain, right? The backend is not blockchain on Updraft.
Excuse me. In the Updraft curriculum,
yes.
Updraft curriculum, the apps that we would make, the backend is exclusively blockchain. And we had a little introduction to kind of a centralized backend at the end of the course where we teach you how to run your own indexer. Which, if you haven't checked out our indexer, by the way, and you're using a paid for indexer service, consider switching because our indexer is awesome. It's built by the head of engineering at Aave. Be sure to check that out. But so yeah, at Updraft, at Cyfrin, we have kind of a mixed bag, right? We have profiles which integrate with your wallets. We have Updraft, which has kind of a more traditional, database. We have CodeHawks, which is obviously a mix as well. You have wallets integration, and then traditional database as well. In Updraft, or in the Updraft curriculum, I promise I'm going someplace with this. In the Updraft curriculum, we have you spin up kind of your Anvil chain. You test there, spin up kind of your R indexer to connect to your Anvil chain, and that's where you do all your testing. But in a more professional environment, that becomes a lot harder. You have maybe spin up a fake database, and then maybe spin up a fake blockchain. And there's different databases for different services, and there's different microservices that you might have to spin up. And from my perspective, where I'm, most of my work is like in Solidity, where everything is very particular, very stringent, very strict. I feel like testing in the Solidity environment is a wonderful experience. Anytime I go to contribute to the Cyfrin platform, I am miserable. I have a much worse experience. I feel like I have to spin up 100 Docker instances. I feel like nobody in the industry has like a good there's not like, all right, this is like how we test. Like in Updraft, we taught Synpress, which is like an E2E testing solution for wallets. A lot of people love it. A lot of people hate it and think it's a waste of time. And so they roll their own. Everyone seems to be rolling their own full stack testing solution. And to me, that's like insane coming from the smart contract world where testing is so critical to get correct. I don't even know what my question is here. Yeah. What happened? Why is full stack development like such a pain in the ass when you get to like, bigger scale? Like what's how do you test? How do you think about testing? How do you think about spinning up Docker instances and different services? And yeah, what are your thoughts there? Why is full stack development and testing? Why do I think it's a nightmare? Why do I think it's a nightmare?
Yeah.
Yeah, read into my brain. Tell me why I don't like full stack development.
I'll definitely try, because I have my own frustrations with testing, but essentially testing is seen in the web development space very differently than a lot of other verticals, right? So in web development, because we have so many different pieces connecting together, the idea isn't to have 100% test coverage. And I think that screws some stuff up, where a lot of, I'm assuming Solidity code, when you're, dealing with millions of dollars potentially, should have 100% test coverage. Is that right?
It not necessarily 100%, but like, yeah, you should aim for very high test coverage. 100% test coverage can kind of be like a vanity metric, because like I've seen, products will come to us, oh, we have 100% test coverage, and they'll be like, the test will just be like, yeah, true, it passes. Like, how like Claude will like comment out a line, be like, and I commented out this line so the test would pass. It's like, okay, well, great. But yeah, high test coverage.
Yeah, so it's very different in the web development space, depending on what you're doing. And it all depends on what you're actually doing. So let's take our platform, for example. We have CodeHawks, which is our competitive audit platform. We have Updraft, which is our education platform. What we do in the web development space and in our team for testing is we figure out areas that are extremely highly important. And those are the areas we start with tests. So for Updraft, for example, can you watch a video? Right? Like, that's an important part of it. So that should be covered in a test. For CodeHawks, for example, rewards calculation, that should be covered in a test. But outside of that, adding tests just for the sake of stuff to pass, for instance, you have like a page that has a testimonial on it. To add a test to show that the testimonial appears exactly as it should appear every single time, right? That's additional overhead that you would add if you had a large team of enterprise developers. But as a startup, you have to make compromises outside of that field, right?
Yeah. So I guess my question would be, so what you just said, hey, like, can I watch videos on Updraft, right? That's like a fundamental thing. And you just said there should be a test for that, right?
Yeah.
If I'm coding a Solidity contract and I can just go into my Foundry test suite, I can say, function test, check to see if video plays, right? And I'll write it in Solidity. In full stack development, I feel like I can go to my my test.ts file. I can write a test, but it's kind of dependent on like 80 different Docker services running. And I feel like before I even write the test, I'm actually going to try to run it myself to see if I can see a video, and then I'm going to go write the test. In Solidity, I don't have to do that, because I know my test is just going to work. It almost feels like, it feels very bizarre to me that I have to like run the entire suite first, check to see if it works, then write the test, and then check to make sure the test actually matches like my manual QA that I've just done. Whereas like in Solidity, I just write the test, and I'm confident to know that that's going to work. I don't know if I'm getting across kind of the question I have here.
I think you are. So you're kind of describing the difference between like a unit test and an end-to-end test in our space. So a unit test is exactly what you're saying that Solidity does. So in our case, if we have for example, the CodeHawks rewards calculation logic is covered in unit tests that you don't need to really run the UI to run. It's just literally, going against the function. You're seeing what you're inputting stuff, and you're seeing what the outputs are. That's it. And the input and output, that's unit testing one-to-one. Where it gets complicated is exactly where you're saying, when you have dependent services that need to be run before that, it's very difficult to set up a unit test that can mimic all those dependent services. And arguably, there's no value in it. Like, you can write a custom thing that can pretend that it's a UI and pretend that it's a video for whatever reason. You could do that. But what's the value? Because if that custom thing is saying yes and the actual services break somewhere down the line, there's no point. So that's why a lot of times I lean towards end-to-end testing in full stack development to cover different paths. Like, don't cover everything in one end-to-end test, cover many different paths and many different end-to-end tests that are critical. because of that integration aspect. If you're trying to do too many unit tests across a web development space, that's just going to bog down everything. It's going to bog down the testing suite. It's going to bog down developers. It's going to require you to essentially be writing more tests than code, like than actual like functional feature code, due to the complexity of those integrations. And I've been in situations, again, the reason that I've moved towards startups is I've been in situations where that was a requirement. And I saw the teams that did that, and like you were shipping one feature every 2 months. And to be clear, in some instances, that's required. You know, a banking application, that should be how it is. I don't know if it's actually how it is, but that should be how it is. Any feature that you implement can impact someone's wallet. That should be how it is. Any healthcare application that impacts people's livelihood, right? Their health. That's probably how it is.
Well, they already messed up. They should be using blockchain on the back end. So they've already made an architectural mistake there. But that's correct, yeah. Not here nor there. But so definitely right. It definitely makes sense. This is one of the points that I usually kind of talk about a lot too. Is okay, Web 2 is like a little bit, I don't know, easier is not the right word, but yeah, the testing requirements are less stringent. You know, if you make a mistake in a smart contract, you lose $1 billion. If you make a mistake on your UI, well, somebody gets an image of a cat instead of an image of a dog. Like, okay, whatever. But I guess like, so with all of this, so yeah, like integration tests, you know, and integration tests exists in smart contracts as well. Mm-hmm. You know, maybe you'll like mock the result from like a Chainlink Oracle. And I hear what you're saying. Hey, maybe it doesn't make sense to like mock the, you know, the video hosting platform for like the video to like test some weird integration, because that's going to be a lot of engineering work just to build the mock and, you know, blah blah blah. But it almost feels like then, okay, if that's the case, then and doing kind of these manual QA tests as you're building is like almost the requirement. It almost feels like being like a DevOps or a Docker pro is like almost more important, because here's what like a lot of developers run into. You know, they'll take like the Cyfrin full stack course, and you know, I've taught them all these things, and then they go to a more production environment and they're like, all right, yeah, now you got to spin up the Docker environment to run your tests. And they're like, what the hell? Patrick didn't teach me that. Now I feel bad because I haven't taught people Docker. But like, I feel like that is a whole other can of worms. You know, how do I very quickly teach containerization, you know, while also like, you know, I guess I could just make the course twice as long. But you know what I mean? Like there's this, it feels like there's almost, we're getting to this whole other skill set. And I've run into this pretty much at every org that I've worked at, where kind of the full stack development for me, like compared to Solidity, it feels like the full stack development is like YOLO. Yeah. Like whatever. But yeah, is this becoming really strong at Docker and DevOps? Like, is that like a prerequisite to even doing full stack development now? Like AI, I feel like when it comes to like DevOps stuff, AI is good, but like still kind of the same level of idiot as like me when it comes to like, it's like it gets most of the stuff right, but the one thing it gets wrong is like the thing that I needed it to get right. I keep asking like these super long, not direct questions. Should you be like a DevOps expert, a Docker expert to do full stack development?
It's a really good question. And actually, I sit on a council for one of the colleges that I went to, where we had this exact discussion. Like, you get into from college, you're taught one thing, and you get into the work and you have like, holy shit, you have a Jenkins pipeline, you have CI/CD here, you have a million different things that are very different across org to org. And that's what you're saying. It's kind of chaos. Every org handles this differently. Like we talked to IBM, they're like, oh, we're all in Jenkins. We have our own Jenkins custom pipelines, and we've literally rewritten Jenkins from the ground up to service our needs. You go to Meta, it's the same thing. They've rewritten the entire CI/CD pipeline from the ground up. So there's no real way to even learn it now to get in and get ready. And that goes towards almost every organization, where you're literally in a spot where you're like, it's chaos. Like you get in and just like, okay, how do you guys do it? You do it completely differently than I did it before. Good. Now I have to figure this out. And learning one way to do it. So I think it is valuable to learn something like a simple Docker, like how to create a simple Docker compose, how to deploy that to something like Heroku or DigitalOcean or something like that, how to manage it with something like Coolify, like a dashboard in front of it. It's good to learn that kind of stuff. The thing is it's not going to prepare you for what you're going to actually hit in production, like in enterprise, whenever you get your first job as a developer or wherever, because it's going to be completely written from scratch. But knowing at least the concepts of what's going on is going to help you adapt to whatever system they've implemented in the first place, right? The biggest skill that you need to learn is to be able to adapt, to be able to read documentation, to be able to ask the right questions of the seniors that are there, to be able to actually sit through orientation and ingest the information that they're throwing at you. It's like, here's how push to production. Okay, don't do that, right? Like, don't do this, don't do that. Like, actually follow those steps and make sure that as a company, you have those steps set up. Now, that's maybe where we're lacking a little bit, because we haven't been able to come back and be like, here's all the new steps that we've added since we've implemented all these systems. And that's where I think when you go into our Cyfrin platform system, you're kind of lost, because we have a team, we have an orientation structure, we have a onboarding structure, and that's what gets people up to speed with our systems. And usually it's about 1 to 2 weeks, and everyone is understanding at least of the critical components of how our pipeline works. Whereas if you come into it from someone that isn't interacting with the team on a day-to-day basis, and you just look at our documentation, it is chaos. Absolutely is chaos. And so like that's why that onboarding component during your first couple of weeks is so critical in pretty much any organization, that like it sets you up for success down the line to be able to troubleshoot these things. And that's the hard part too.
So for context, for people watching, so yeah, as most of my work is smart contract space. I sit on a lot of security councils now, doing security work. I do, I still make educational content, but every once in a while, I'm like, hey, there's a feature I want Cyfrin platform to have. I'm just going to go make it. And obviously, Mike loves hearing it when I'm like, hey, I'm going to go make this thing. I haven't been onboarded, and I'm too arrogant. I'm like, yeah, I can do it. Like, well, I'm smart. And then I rock up and I'm like, why doesn't this work? What's going on? So basically, what Mike's saying is I have skipped a couple of steps here. Saying that onboarding process is super important. And I'm just like complaining about Docker and stuff because I missed the orientation. But I think what you're saying makes a lot of sense, and it almost is kind of coalescing. Is that the right word? I don't think that's the right word, but maybe it's the right word. Coalescing to kind of like two thoughts. Number one, yeah, any org you work at, no matter what, is going to have a different process. So this is where learning foundations is so important. Mm-hmm. And you definitely want, no matter what org you work at, they're going to have an onboarding process, and you want to go through that, right? Like it's not going to be, Foundry and smart contract development is really nice because everyone's kind of just doing everything the same way. Yeah, okay, Foundry versus Hard Hat versus Moccasin are going to be a little bit different, but the on-ramp is going to be really easy. In full stack development, that's just not the case. There's so many technologies, there's so many services, there's so much more nuance that it's just harder. And this is actually kind of almost leads me to like a side tangent. I actually think that sometimes full stack development is harder. Full stack development is conceptually harder than smart contract development, just because there's so much stuff. Smart contract development is harder than full stack development because the risks are so much higher. Yeah. And so to me, they're both harder, but for different reasons, which is interesting. And then the final, piece that I'm kind of taking away from this is, I probably should have taught Docker in the full stack course, but now I'm like, oh, that'll be like another 6 hours of curriculum, I guess. But yeah, like just to your point, like so that they have some experience, so that when they do rock up and they're like, all right, cool, like run PMPM Docker up, like they don't go, what the hell is this Docker thing? A common question that new developers ask is, okay, well, why do I even need Docker? The whole like, oh, it works on my machine thing. Mm-hmm. Yeah, sorry, I interrupted what you were going to say.
No, I think you're right. I don't know if it'd be 6 hours. That's my only pushback on it. Is I don't think it's that complicated to not be able to be at least conceptually taught and like throw in an example here and there in an hour or two. Again, for what a web developer needs to be able to interact with it, that's the mindset you have to be. They don't have to be the ones that create the Docker containers. They don't have to be the ones that go in and usually like maintain the Docker containers. Even they just have to be able to interface with the Docker containers.
Right.
They have to be able to spin it up. They have to be able to spin it down. They have to be able to know how the connections between the Docker containers work to some degree, right? So that they can troubleshoot that. And that's really it. They don't need the in-depth knowledge of like, how do we create a Docker compose file from scratch? Like you can kind of almost gloss over that and stuff like that. So there's ways to teach it that will benefit web developers without it being like a 6 hour course.
Got it. Okay. All right. So Mike has given me some additional curriculum work to do. I appreciate it, man.
I should have gave it to you during our like first review session. So that's my bad.
Well, I probably didn't want, in the back of my mind, I'm like, yeah, just don't even ask him. Just do our indexer, do Anvil. Because at the same time, the goal was to really be like, all right, like here's how you make, these static apps that interact with Anvil. And then towards the end, I was like, all right, let's, you will probably use an indexer if you have a professional environment. And that would be something you would want to spin up in a Docker container. And that would probably be like a nice added next step. And actually, yeah, maybe that would be like an easy way to extend the course by like an hour or two and not be too like overburdensome. Yep. Cool. Okay. So next topic I do want to talk to you about in terms of Web3, Web2 integrations. So something that we don't have a lot of on the Cyfrin platforms, but we want to, and we're looking into it. Is like integrations with blockchains. So right now our stuff is pretty simple. It's like for like CodeHawks, for example, we used to have checks on if you're a smart contract wallet or not, because we wanted to be able to like work with different chains easier. Wallet integration stuff is relatively easy to do. We don't send any transactions yet. How are we basically making that work? How do you have built a lot of apps that integrate directly with blockchains. What I know you're not spinning up like a Dockerized Anvil instance or a Dockerized blockchain. How do you think about approaching these systems that have all these Web 2 services and Web 3 services that integrate with blockchains, that integrate with APIs, databases? Like, is it just like another container that you spin up? Like, how do you combine the two into like a professional system?
Honestly, like for what we need and for what it all depends on the complexity level that we're going to be integrating. But initially, a testnet integration is honestly more than enough for testing. Testnet RPC, testnet integration, and then some sort of mixer.
Ooh.
Like what I'm talking about, not like sending transactions, but like just reading off the chain, right?
Got it. Yeah.
That's really all we're going to be doing at this point in time. As we start sending transactions, that's where it becomes more complicated, and that's where you're probably going to need a DevNet. You're probably going to have to spin up something local to do that. There's going to be so many more steps involved in that it's going to require most likely a re-architecture of a few elements of our applications. It's going to be a whole other thing, and like you said, it's going to be probably part of our Docker pipeline. Like it's going to be something that's spun up using a PNPM.
Yeah.
When we spin up one of our apps, we do PNPM, whatever the app name is. Yep. And part of that process is like a bunch of different Dockerized containers that spin up. One of those is most likely going to be a local DevNet.
So one of the things that we push really hard in Updraft curriculum, and I push for every group to do, no matter who you are, is have a local like a local version of your network so you can run unit tests. I'll take snapshots of Anvil and I will put that into, my make file or my just file for running tests. And if I want to run an integration test, I already have a snapshot of like a fake blockchain that I've specifically set up, and this is what we're talking about, like, taking a lot of time to build all these mocks and all this testing infrastructure. But that's something that I do. I also do that so that anybody else who comes to work on the project can just do like, just Anvil. It has an Anvil command, which spins up this fake blockchain already in this certain state. Obviously, like, that's very helpful, but it's also like a lot of work. What are your thoughts there, like on combining, the Web3, the blockchain stuff with the Web2 stuff, the databases, and everything? Do you think it makes more sense to do a DevNet, or should people be spinning up their own like local DevNets? Should we have like a cloud? Should we just, drop an Anvil instance in the cloud, have people connect to that? What do you think would be your ideal setup for when we do more transaction sending? Like, where do you want to go, Mike?
I mean, right now, to follow the same patterns that we have, it'd probably be a local setup, local Dockerized setup, just to have it.
It would be a Dockerized chain.
It would be Dockerized, yeah.
Okay.
It would be Dockerized, just to follow, because all of our databases are mocked locally, not mocked, but actually spun up in Docker containers separately locally, including our caching, and like we have a ton of different databases, obviously, internally. And that's just how we've done it. And it's just a lot easier to troubleshoot. You just spin up that local container. You can go right into it and do whatever you want, server admin wise, if something is not working correctly. And obviously those are very much one-to-one mimicked to what we have in production as well. Now that's where this is a little bit different, I guess, because it wouldn't be exactly one-to-one mimicked as in production, because it's a local DevNet. But I still think we'd follow that pattern. But having said that, I mean, the other options you said, like having something in the cloud, maybe is okay. Like, it sounds expensive for what it is. But
yeah, the instant that left my mouth,
maybe
cloud.
Probably how go that way, but
I don't know how we as an industry like got psyops into like thinking cloud was cool for 15 years. Like that is crazy to me. Yeah. Actually, that's not true. I do understand. There's a lot of money behind it. There's a lot of money
approaching
behind
$1 trillion. I think I heard that the cloud infrastructure stuff is approaching $1 trillion. It's like 900 billion or something like that.
I mean, like if you go to university, like this is another one of these like component skills that we're talking about here. Like, hey, when you learn development, they don't teach you Docker. When you learn development, they don't really teach you like cloud, or well, they kind of basically what they do is they go, hey, spin this up on AWS, right? And it's almost like baked into your curriculum that, yeah, you will use cloud. And like, that's the, and then like you go, oh, if I just bought the hardware, I would recoup those costs in like 2 months. But, anyways, what were we talking about? Oh yeah. Dockerized blockchains.
Yeah.
So you're thinking, yeah, it would be like a local Dockerized setup. And then you could play with your chain locally and, do whatever tweaks that you need to do.
Yes. Now, like that's just like off the cuff right now, before we actually go into that space, which is probably going to be soon, actually. It'll probably be me going through Updraft to a certain degree and seeing how you guys do it, and probably taking that knowledge and putting that into the consideration as well. So, but from what you're saying, yeah, it sounds like to match our current patterns, it would be a Dockerized container.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense to me. And from my perspective, like, yeah, that would be the way that I would want to do it. Because it allows, like I was saying, allows everyone to do kind of the same testing process. And when you are working with smart contracts, when you are working with, once you make the API call, once you hit enter, that's it. Like the money's gone, or the transaction's through, or whatever. We want to be incredibly specific with how we're doing tests, and have everyone follow the same methodology. So. Makes a lot of sense there. So the only other question I had, and this is something I've read a lot about, and I know that you and I have had this conversation before, but I think it is interesting enough that I want to ask you on stream here too. So monorepos versus, and like monolithic architecture, if you will, and maybe we can even make parallels to blockchain if we want here. Monorepos versus, I don't know, what's the like modular repos, multiple repos? What's the opposite of
just
mono?
normal. I don't know.
It's just normal.
Yeah,
Yeah, or like a bunch of repos, right?
yeah. Distributed. I don't know.
So we enjoy the monorepo setup here at Cyfrin, and that's something that's always been like a little foreign to me because this is the first time that I worked in an org that did a monorepo. I know like Google, they have their massive monorepo that they have everything in. But yeah, why did we make that choice? Why do we like monorepos? And the reason I ask is because of the clean code part of me is like, ooh, like you want to modularize stuff, and you can just have, in my mind, I'm like, oh, you can just have a repo and have it install from the other repo. But I also kind of get like, oh, everything in one place, so that's nicer. You can make all the integrations better. Why did we decide to do a mono repo? And what are your thoughts on people choosing mono repos as their architectural setups? And then just one more caveat, like in the blockchain space, we typically don't see this. We actually see most groups, they have like a UI repo, boom, that's one repo. They have an indexer repo, boom, that's another repo. They have their contracts repo, boom, that's another repo. Very few blockchain projects are choosing this mono repo structure. So yeah, why did we choose this? What are the thoughts there?
Yeah, it's a really good question because I was actually pretty anti monorepo for a long time, probably up to like 3 or 4 years ago, because of all the negative experiences that I've had with it. It used to overcomplicate things a lot, and that's probably where you're coming from as well, like where it just made it so that the dependencies would clash. Like that would happen a lot, or like you would start downloading dependencies and would download all your dependencies into separate folders, and then you would have to like repeat those downloads. It wouldn't share dependencies. There was a lot of weirdness in monorepos before stuff like PnPM workspaces came to be, NX, which is a good monorepo framework, and then the one that we're using, which is TurboRepo, which is the one that's supported by Vercel. The main reason that we went down the monorepo route is because, again, we're a startup. We had a small team, and it integrated very well with our Vercel infrastructure that we had at the time, or we have right now as well, partially. And it made it very easy to, again, like you were saying, connect all of our platforms and all the packages that they share. So we do apply a very modular approach. Like all of our UI is shared in a UI package. All of our like shared tooling is shared in a package called tools and lib and stuff like that. So there's a ton of shared components between all of our applications. And if you go to our applications right now and you go to CodeHawk's Updraft profiles, you'll see how similar they look. And a lot of that is made simpler. Not like I understand that the distributed or the standard approach, totally doable with that, but it's made a lot simpler with the monorepo approach, where you don't have to have these sim links, where you don't have to pull different repos in from different places, where it's just literally all in one place. And when you're working on it and it's all in one editor, you don't have to customly, I know you can put multiple repos into one editor, but again, all of that is overhead for just opening up your repo and opening up and starting to program, right? Troubleshooting is slightly easier. Symlink, like linking between the repos, is built in. They can be solved either way. Like I'm not saying that monorepos are the one and only solution to this problem. Like obviously that's not the case, but because of the evolution of them and the DX upgrade and PnPM coming to the scene, I think I've had a better time than I would have had with separate repos at right now. Not that we haven't had our issues with the monorepos as well. Like they're not perfect in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah, basically the answer is kind of with anything. There's nuance. There's
like
very
preference. Nuance.
Yeah, very rarely a technology is objectively better. It's just trade-offs, and we made some trade-offs. And even though I'm kind of grilling you on a lot of your choices here live on stream, I mean, Updraft is sick, Cyfrin site is sick, Solid is sick. Like all of our products are sick. So, for my opinion, hell yeah, great choices. They resulted in great stuff here. So, Mike, we have 5 minutes left. I wanted to actually jump into the comments because we've had a lot of people leaving some questions in here that I wanted to get to before jumping off. Do you have a hard stop at 11 or?
Technically, yes, I have a stand up, but
Yeah. Okay. We'll answer some questions really quickly. Let me just rock up the questions here. I'm going to skip over some questions. Sorry. So somebody donated to us. Thank you so much, Ravikant. Hopefully I said your name correct. Solidity, EVM versus Rust, SVM, Aptos, SWI, etc. Actually, I don't know what the question is here.
Yeah.
I guess I can take this one. Actually, exactly what I just said. Very rarely is a technology strictly better than another. There's always trade-offs. Same thing here. There's trade-offs between each one of these technologies. Solidity right now has like 85% of all smart contract value. So if you want to learn a skill that's directly applicable, Solidity is a great way to go. Rust, SVM, Aptos, Sway, they're kind of a combination of maybe that last 10 to 15%. If you want to learn like a newer technology that has some potential upside, great. There's obviously some risk that it isn't adopted as well, but Rust might be the exception here because Rust obviously is applicable even outside the blockchain space. So whatever you want to do. Without C or C++, can't we learn Solidity properly? You actually can learn Solidity fine without C and C++. So don't worry about that. But when you do get to the assembly sections, like much later, and you do want to learn the lower level stuff, like having C or C++ is actually like very helpful.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Like I think you can do anything with just Solidity. Like you can be a really stacked programmer just Solidity. I think just having that extra bit of foundational knowledge just makes you like level up a little bit. But it doesn't. It's not required for anything really.
Definitely. Oh wow! Thank you again for the donation. Wow. Do companies even consider who are just starting in Web3, freshers with no professional experience, how to stand out from others if everyone has the same source of learning? And thank you, Cyfrin Updraft. Well, thank you for the donation. Really appreciate that. Yeah, Mike, do companies even consider who are just starting in Web3 or even Web2 with no professional experience? How do you stand out as a person looking for a job?
Yeah, it's I mean, it's tougher right now than it was 3 or 4 years ago, but having said that, it's always been tough. This has been a challenge for people. If you're just learning, if without a traditional education, you're self-learning, you have to do many different things to stand out. Something that I've seen a lot of success in, and like even in our internal team, is someone that contributes to open source. So you find an open source project that you're passionate about and you consistently contribute, someone's going to notice, the maintainers are going to notice, and the maintainer has the ability, like obviously they're going to try to hire you, the person that's been helping them for free essentially, over some random person that they have to go out and hire. Like the hiring process is a long begrudging process. So the more you can circumvent it by, again, open source or going to meetups, doing hackathons, whatever it takes to get you a portfolio and to get you in front of people that actually make the decisions on hiring, right? Rather than just going and cold applying on everything. Not that that doesn't work. You can still get a job by cold applying. I think people have blown that out of proportion a little bit, but it's very difficult now. So I really highly recommend you do all the different extracurriculars that you are capable of doing. I understand not everyone can travel and go to all these different meetups. So maybe you only do the online ones. I understand that not everyone can spend a bunch of time doing open source. So you have to pick the things that work for you best, but not doing any of them is almost a guaranteed risk of not being able to break in right now. You need to do something. You need to build your portfolio. You need to reach the right people.
Yeah, 100% agree, right? In the Updraft curriculum, we talk about this a lot too. Open source contributing is kind of this really underrated thing. And the reason it's underrated is because it's hard. It's not easy. It's almost kind of the same. I get security, new security researchers saying, hey, how do I get a job or work at a firm? And I go, find bugs. Like if you find bugs, you will get a job. And I might get back, oh, that's like, hey, that's really hard. Like, how am I supposed to find bugs? And it's like, well, that's what the job is going to be, So if you want to get hired to find bugs, go find bugs. If you want to get hired to write code, write code, write code and then prove that you write code. So if you want to stand out, that's how to do it. As Mike said, we've hired a lot of people who have worked on stuff with us because we've been like, wow, like we want you to keep doing that and we'll pay you. Or people who have a track record of building, amazing things. For our audit team, we hired people who found bugs. Nobody on the Cyfrin audit team came from, out of nowhere. Yes, the Cyfrin Updraft certificate is indeed hard, but that's a great place to go as well to even see, hey, do I even have the knowledge that is expected? I've had a lot of people tell me, hey, we should make the Cyfrin Updraft cert easier so more people can pass. And I'm like, no, it's hard. And just be better, I don't want to give a Solidity cert to somebody who sticks their private key in a .env. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not going to, yeah. Last question here, we will let maybe last two questions. I know Mike's got to go to stand up. What would be the jump for someone from Updraft to a professional Web3 developer? Yeah, I guess I'll take this one. Kind of exactly what we just talked about here, right? Write code, contribute to open source, find bugs. The beauty about Web3 is that so much stuff is open source that you actually have the opportunity. This is actually one of the things I love about Web3. In Web2, most companies are closed source, so you don't even have the opportunity to contribute. But in Web3, Uniswap has Uniswap is source available. Aave is open source. Curve is open source. Solidity is open source. Viper is open source. Every big org in this industry is open source, so you can start to try to contribute. And then last question here. What do you think about specialization in the industry? As a developer, do I have to be an expert in all areas like ZK, Interop, DeFi? Mike, what do you think about that?
No, you don't. You can't be an expert in all areas. I should be clear there. Like, it's pretty much impossible because of the scope of each area. I think starting as a generalist and finding your niche that you kind of resonate with is actually a good way to go. I've noticed that people that go deeper lately have had more success rather than people that go constantly spread. You are limiting yourself because based on the niche, you might be limiting the opportunities in the other spaces. But if you find the right one, it could make you stand out. And again, you're looking for that area to stand out right now. The hard part is finding the right niche to actually go down, whether it's ZK, it sounds like the good niche, Interop, DeFi, like all of these are really good. And they all actually, some of these actually do connect pretty intensely, but I would recommend starting wide to see where your interests and abilities lie and then going down that path.
Excellent. Well, okay. Last question because they donated. Thank you so much for donating. I don't know what currency that is, but great. Any ZK courses you really recommend? A small but useful project will be valuable. Cyfrin Updraft, we have a Noir course that teaches ZK. We have more ZK curriculum coming. Be sure to stay tuned. So, and there's ZK is still kind of niche when it comes to its applications. That is something that I think as we see more. Kira also just said on Updraft we also have an intro to ZK as well. So I would say if you're looking to start somewhere, definitely go there and then start building stuff. Tornado Cache is a fantastic code base to research and read to learn more about ZK. So, but thank you all so much for coming, Mike. I really appreciate you letting me take you on stream and, grilling you all these questions about, hey, why did we do this as a company? Definitely kind of a different interview here, but hopefully, you all found some value because we're literally being like, yeah, here's how we do things. Here's how we made these decisions. So kind of like peeking behind the curtain a little bit here. Mike, where can other people follow you? And if they want to listen to, the other huge amount of knowledge that you have, where can they follow you and where can they listen to you more?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm on X at HTML Everything, and we have a web development podcast that we release weekly called HTML All the Things. So go check that out, give that a listen, let me know what you think.
HTML All the Things podcast, one of these niche podcasts where they just dump knowledge every single week. Definitely highly recommend checking it out, especially if you're looking to break into web development, Web 2 development, any type of development. Some top people come by and just talk about things that you wouldn't get on a normal podcast. So definitely be sure to go check that out. So, all right. Well, thank you, everybody, and have a great one. Thank you, Mike.
Bye. Thanks, everyone.